bitter, or are you upset? Do you feel like people feel do you feel like you got messed over? Do you feel like you got do you feel like you were the victim of and across the board, I always have the same exact answer because I don't feel that way at all. What I feel like is I feel like I'm a better person because of all of my experiences. But at the same time, even though I know that I'm a better person because of the 30 years that I went through in prison and the times that I got beat up so bad that I had to go to the free world emergency room to have my face put back together, and the times that I was went through riots, and the fact that they took advantage of the fact that I was 17 years old and couldn't afford a lawyer and didn't know anything about the law to give me an extremely excessive sentence. And the fact that they held the fact that I was a teenager against me and held me for 17 years longer than they had to. I was eligible for parole for 17 years. I could have been out of prison. People are like, man, you must really, I don't know how you've endured it. I don't know how you did what you did. I hear that all the time. And I'm not bitter about it. I'm not at all, because I really feel like I came out of the whole thing a better person. But at the exact same time, I would not want my worst enemy to go through what I went through. And I could never in a million years, no matter what someone has done, put them through the things that I've been through. So, maybe my mindset is one that is there. It's a function of trying to change the system for the better without trying to perpetuate the exact same kind of pattern that's going on, because the criminal justice system as it is in Texas right now is one where there's this vicious circle of abuse, criminal behavior on the part of the person that's being incarcerated, and then criminal crimes being perpetuated against that person while he's perpetuated until he gets back out. And then so you have on one end this guy, the society that feels like, oh, well, whatever we do, whatever happens to him is his fault. He put himself in that position. And then on the juxtaposition, he gets out and he's, whether it's conscious or whether it's unconscious, because it's not always a conscious thing. Response to trauma is not always a conscious form of behavior. Oftentimes, people are angry, and it's something that's simmering down right below their thinking pattern. It's a feeling that they have that's from something that they've stuffed away and compartmentalized that is manifesting itself in negative behavior. And it comes right back out, and then the person goes right back in, and then the guy gets back out. Who's being served by that idea? Who?
No, there's no one being served by it.
It perpetuates
right.
the exact thing that the prison system is claiming that it's there to stop.
No, it makes it 100. It makes it worse, because as soon as they get out, they're not prepared to be back in, and so all they have to go off of is the things that got them in there. None of the problems that brought people into prison in the first place are addressed. So then they get back out, and then we're surprised that they do the same things because the problems were never addressed.
In the 90s and in the early 2000s, they had newspaper articles that were in USA Today about, and it wasn't even about Texas. It was other prison systems in other states that had a problem with inmates masturbating in public. Yeah, you've been in prison, there's terms for it, jacking, killing, all this other stuff. They call it, that's what, the sort of colloquialisms that are used by inmates. There's a whole entire culture, little groups of inmates that form that are these public masturbators.
Yeah.
They literally form their own little community of self-support, so to speak. Self-support. That's another way of putting that.
Yes.
They masturbate, in open on female prison guards, right? And I only mention that to mention that right in the years that Rainforest and I, especially Rainforest, but he kind of came in right there at the beginning of the PRIA concept, where they actually started taking this type of behavior seriously. But this went on for the full 30 years I was in prison. There was riots that were fought where inmates other inmates had had enough. They're like, man, I'm not going to sit around in this place with all these grown men with their penises out in the open masturbating. It's just, I can't do it anymore. And we had to fight back. It has gotten that bad in prison. And I mentioned all of this in connection with something else. There was a guy, I wish I could remember his name, and I'm hoping that before this podcast is aired that Ryan can do his homework and find this guy's case so he can look up the articles. But he was exonerated. He was in prison for over a decade, I think, and eventually was exonerated. He didn't commit the crime that they said he did. But the time that he spent in prison had turned this guy into a sexual pervert, one of these masturbators. And he would have never been this way before. He'd have never turned into that kind of person had he not been sent to prison. And so a couple of years after this guy's released out of prison, maybe just a couple months, I'm not really totally sure, there was articles all of a sudden posted in the Houston Chronicle that this guy popped up in a public department store and he's masturbating on women in public. Somebody catches this guy in a corner somewhere jacking off on women in this department store, right? And Quan LX had to come and save this guy and had to come and defend him, and kind of go in. It's nothing that you can't possibly defend something like this in the court of public opinion. You can't get on the newspaper and start, the guy was masturbating because he was, it's not going to work. So behind the scenes, though, Quan LX was able to go to the authorities, the judges, and so forth that are fixing to put this guy back in prison for a sex crime now because of the person that they turned him into, from the situation that they put him in. He should have never been in prison in the first place, and because he was there, it turned him into a horrible sex offender. That's the kind of cycle that I'm talking about. That's the kind of thing that goes in there that gets in people's heads and turns them into people that they wouldn't even be had they not been in that situation to begin with. And that is what is not serving society. That is what is doing the opposite, having the opposite effect of what this prison system is claiming to do, claiming to be.
Right. And the whole prison system right now is the idea is if you commit a crime, then we're going to put you away and we're going to get you away from the good people. And the good people can live their lives while the bad people are set off aside. But that's it. That's like, as far as it is, that's the end of the story. In Texas, it's a little worse because they're like, you get what you get, so we're going to put you aside. Texas will only treat inmates humanely until it's gone through, they fought it all the way through the Supreme Court, and it's been forced down Texas's throat that they have to do things like not feed us animal steroids, not to provide AC in over 100-degree heat.
With inmates dying from hyperthermia, not hyper, excessive heat.
Right. And it's all of that. And they do, just so you know, yes, they do feed inmates animal steroids. Malone was around for that fun excitement.
I'm a product of animal steroids. The animal I am today, just due to the steroids that I had to eat for decades in prison.
But so you send them aside, and then behaviors like you were talking about, the public masturbation, those things get rewarded in prison. Things that would never get rewarded in society, and we get chastised and we get you into trouble. Those things get rewarded inside, and then there's no one, like I said, there's no one trying to treat or address the problematic behaviors that brought them in the first place. There's no one trying to show them and model decent, good, citizen-like behaviors before they get out. And the the rehabilitation, as Malone and I have both experienced, is basically once you make parole, then they're going to give you a few months where they're just going to throw information at you. And usually it's in the form of additional punishment. For me, when I went to the rehabilitation part of my prison stay, it was 8 months of officers just being able to do whatever they wanted to you. And you could not say anything back. They could wake you up at 5 a.m. They could make you get fully dressed and sit in bed all day. They could take away rec. They could kick you out of the day room. They could do whatever they wanted. They could lock you up in solitary. And if you fought back, you would lose your parole. So,
to be fair, they can do all those things anyways. But the problem is that inmates can win in the long run because the grievance process oftentimes takes more than 6 months just for a grievance to go through. So if you get yourself in a situation where you're in a 6-month program, it doesn't matter.
Right, you're out of there.
But by the time your grievance goes through, you're already going to be out of prison anyways, if you make it that far.
Right. And if it doesn't, like, if you don't go that far, you already lost your parole. So
right,
it's game over.
Right. So, trust me, if you were in prison, you're going to play their game and you're going to go along with whatever hoop they want you to jump through so that you can get out of there.
Right. So this is why, and that's actually, these are the things that we want to talk about tomorrow night over at the college, is basically, this is why prison doesn't work. And the way, for me, the big thing about readdressing it is, it's not that we can't take people out of society. You do have to take them out of society to address the issue. But when you take them out of society, then it's all about addressing the issues, having people, not officers who are focused on safety. It's about having specialists who are focused on welfare and trying to address these behaviors and making it a safe place for everyone, so that when they get out, when someone's done with a sentence, it shouldn't just be an arbitrary, you've got 10 years, hopefully you've learned your lesson by the time of 10 years. It should be, you're going to this place, that when you're ready to come out, we've got these specialists who have got this set program for you, ready to go as soon as you go in. Once you finish the program, you will go out, and not only will you go out, you will have all the skills you need to be a better person, citizen, take care of yourself, all of that.
Yeah. And it's not just the, I kind of wonder about the concept of taking people all the way out of society. I think that taking people out of society isn't necessarily helping them either, because that
right
the lack of society has its own form of control, has its own form of behavior enforcements and so forth, and a lot of what happens to people outside in prison is because they're outside of that society. They're outside of the normal sort of behavioral control patterns that are there that society imposes on all of us. And sometimes some of the things that happen to people in prison that change them the most are whenever people come back from society. There's certain church programs or things like Bridges to Life and all that kind of all of a sudden wake people back up to the actual norms that are should have been been lived by or so forth outside of prison. And I think that's really another major flaw of the prison system, is the concept of taking people out of the world, taking people out of society, and putting them in this false alternate reality, because that false alternate reality enforces those behaviors that you're talking about, reinforces. I mean, the thing that was like the most reinforced sort of idea whenever I came into prison was this concept of just might makes right. You know, if you can do it type of thing. If I can victimize you, if I can take something from you and you can't do anything about it, then I should. You know, it's mine by right of strength, type of thing. The sort of law of the jungle kind of concept, which you don't encounter that, and if you do, that's an immediate violation that's going to put you in the criminal sector. But it was completely 100% reinforced by guards and inmates alike.
Right. It's a lot of officers especially thrived on it. They really
And that
enjoyed
victimization that a lot of people had imposed upon them in prison, they sat there and they realized they knew that, well, in here you might be able to get the better of me because you have either the numbers or you have you're physically stronger than I am. But out there in the world, I can get the better of you. I can, through either having a gun or weapon or maybe I have the numbers out there, that type of thing. So people plotted their revenge. You have that whole, when you think about that whole entire fiasco, that horrible event that happened whenever James Burke was dragged to his death in Jasper, Texas. People make it like there's some kind of Klan group or something that was in Jasper, Texas that did that. It wasn't anything of the sort. It was a couple of guys, about like 3 guys that were on Beat 01 who had been thoroughly victimized by black gangs in prison in Beat 01. And they sat around and plotting that. While they were on Beat 01, they wanted to pay black people back for the crimes, for the abuse that they endured at the hands of blacks while they were in prison. That would have had normal laws of behavior been enforced in prison at that time, that crime could have been completely avoided.
And that's another thing. Like all these things, like this has been a very un-PC episode of the Shakedown, but racism. A lot of the any small societal issue gets blown up to 1,000 times because of prison. If there's any power disparities due to race or power disparities due to gender, then that gets blown up as soon as you add this criminal justice system on top of it, and it makes it totally worse for the people in there.
In the 90s and in the 90s and the early 2000s, I mean, racism was another one of those things that was positively enforced in prison. The guards, the inmates, all of it. Prisons were segregated not by the guards. They were segregated by the inmates. Inmates had their own. You walk into a day room, you had black benches, you had Mexican benches, you had white benches. And that was enforced by the inmates. God forbid you sit on the wrong bench. You could suffer great physical abuse from you. You would be beat up, if not killed, for doing that. And it's difficult for people that haven't been in prison to understand the mindset, but people didn't respect you if you weren't racist. Blacks respected white people that were in prison that were racist. If they went and tattooed swastikas on them, there was guys I would see literally had like tattoos of Klansmen hanging black people on their back, and they're sitting there in the day room playing dominoes at the tables with the black inmates because the black inmates respected them because of their race, because they felt like these guys were really down for their people, and that's how they also themselves were. They hated white people, and were very open about it, and they didn't respect you unless you were that way. So I mean, it was this. It's an upside down world that's. It's not something that's easily comprehended by people that are outside of it. And so when you mention a gang name like the Aryan Brotherhood, the name, Aryan Brother, that immediately sends these horrific negative connotations that go along with it into the minds of anybody that hadn't been in prison. But they don't even understand that the Aryan Brotherhood was formed in response to black racism against white. That was the whole reason they even called it what they called it, and that they formed the group to begin with, was to keep from to gain the respect of the blacks in prison, not to not to kill blacks or anything like that. It was to gain the respect of the other races in prison, to keep from being victimized by them.
And that's right. And because one thing too is like everyone is questioning everyone about what their motives are. If you
And
come,
it's not like that now. You know,
No.
it's not nearly as what it was then. But
right. Still, but even when I was locked up, people still, there was always a question. What's your game? What's your catch? What are you in for? Like for me especially, the thing I constantly had to deal with was the question of, well, you're a quiet guy, you're nice, you have some brains about you. What are you in for? What's your deal? What kind of mess are you going to cause? And like that was, they're always looking for what is the catch on all of this. Everyone is. I was a lot of times looking for because I just after being stuck in there a while, you end up, that's kind of, you have to learn.
After you got stuck in there several times, you had to start really wondering, these people that came up to you, I mean, what's your catch? How are you going to catch me? I mean, people can understand that. Why you would have been leery after the first 2 or 3 times. Then after that, you come up to me, you got a smile on your face. I mean, that doesn't mean you're friendly. It doesn't necessarily.
No.
And this has been the light, airy episode.
The light, airy, like taking it easy.
Free, taking it easy, just happy to be in Colorado episode of the Shakedown.
That has been nothing but happy thoughts, rainbows.
Nothing but happy thoughts. Yeah, rainbows. Been lots of rainbows. Lots of rainbows.
Lots of rainbows.
Safe space. You are safe here.
That is one thing Malone has noticed. All the safe space stickers everywhere.
I feel safer than I've ever felt.
There's going to be a giant safe space sticker on Malone before he leaves.
I hope so. I certainly need it. I certainly do.
We're gonna have CU educate Malone on how to become a safe space.
Yes. Well, you're a lot safer due to me. I mean, due to my efforts, due to my heroism.
Yes.
Yes.
The world is much safer.
Not the world, just you.
Just me.
Yes. Yes.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. That and the world of orangutan conservancy.
And that is an important part
of what I'm about.
Yes. Of all that. Well, I think because Malone Malone wants to go to the barcade down the road and check out.
It's a safe space. They've got signs out front with rainbows on them that say it's a safe space, and I want to see this.
He wants to know how safe.
I want to feel safe.
He wants to feel safe playing skee ball. Is basically, I think, what it ends up being.
And there's a danger in a skee ball.
There usually is. And then, but I would like to point out that, this is their first time. Once again, awesome 1 camera setup. First time Malone in the studio, which is awesome. You get to actually hear him.
You can actually hear me and see me.
The Shakedown was produced at Longmont Public Media. And our theme song, Shakedown, was brought to you by Envato Elements. If you want any Shakedown merchandise, or you want to support the show, you can go to waywordpress.com. That's WAYWORD press.com.